So Deshaun Watson just sent a second urgent message to Shedeur Sanders. Now, we all seen his workout video. That was a message to all the quarterbacks in the Cleveland Browns room, not just Shedeur Sanders.
The fact that, she mentioned Dylan Gabriel, and there's a strong possibility that, Dylan Gabriel might end up trading. You kind of said to me that kind of creates a narrative, okay, the plan.
She opened my eyes to something.
What's that?
Because to this point,
even I was wrong, because the only reason I came out with that report, it was based on the reaction of the entire front office, along with Andrew Berry and Jimmy Haslam. Let me explain to you what I'm talking about. See, during week 7 or week 6,
here on Sleeper Browns, it says Dylan Gabriel is not really in the mix to start for the Browns in 2026 per Mary Kay Cabot, one of the leaders of the Anybody But Shedeur Mafia, Mary Kay Cabot.
Green Bay Packers are finalizing a trade to send Rashawn Gary to the Dallas Cowboys. I'm told it's going to be a late round 2027 draft pick. We're awaiting the confirmation on the trade. They're still working through it, still finalizing the deal.
when Deshaun first showed that workout video, I looked at people like, you didn't know he was getting ready like that? He was game shape ready? Because during the season when Shedeur barely could even get in any games, we thought Deshaun Watson was coming out in week 9.
Something interesting is starting to bubble up around the Cleveland Browns, and it involves a name that has been part of this organization for a very long time. For years, Joel Bitonio has been one of the most reliable and respected players on that offensive line. He has been the kind of veteran every team wants in their locker room. Tough, consistent, professional, and someone who has seen almost every version of Browns football over the last decade. When people talk about stability in Cleveland, especially during seasons where the team was going through constant change, Bitonio was always one of the few pieces that stayed the same. That is why the latest news surrounding him has caught a lot of people off guard. For a moment, it looked like Bitonio might simply be thinking about retirement. That would have made sense. After all, he's been in the league a long time. He has played.
It's over, man. It's a wrap. Dylan Gabriel is done with the Cleveland Browns. This was an awful pick. This was a top 100 draft pick who is now about to be out of there for a late round pick, like a 7th round pick. This is nuts. Dylan Gabriel and his fiance, y'all both can crash out to this one. She had a lot to say last offseason, last training camp, and all of that.
Through countless physical battles in the trenches, and the offensive line position is one of the most demanding spots in football. When veterans start to think about life after football, nobody really questions it. But now the story seems to be taking a completely different turn. Instead of retirement, there are growing conversations that Bitonio may actually want to continue playing, just not in Cleveland. That twist changes the entire tone of the situation. Because if a veteran like him is willing to keep playing but possibly somewhere else, then naturally people start asking bigger questions about what is really going on behind the scenes with the Browns. To understand why this is such a big talking point right now, you have to look at what happened last season. The Browns' offensive line, which had been one of the team's strengths for years, suddenly looked like a unit that was struggling. Protection issues showed up more than expected. The rhythm of the offense never seemed fully comfortable. And when that happens in the NFL, people start looking closely at the trenches because that is where games are often won or lost. Last season did not feel like the standard that Cleveland fans had grown used to from that group up front. For players who take pride in dominating at the line of scrimmage, that kind of season can leave a mark. Offensive linemen are a different breed of competitor. They measure themselves by physical control, by protecting their quarterback, by creating running lanes, and by playing with unity as a group. When that standard slips even a little, it creates frustration inside the building. Now imagine being a veteran like Bitonio, someone who has carried leadership responsibility in that room for years, watching the unit go through one of its tougher seasons. It would not be surprising if that situation forced him to reflect on where things stand and where the team is heading next. And that brings us to another important piece of the puzzle, the direction of the franchise moving forward. Cleveland is entering what many people are calling a new chapter. The organization is building around young quarterback Shedeur Sanders, and with that comes a shift in identity. Whenever a team begins shaping its future around a new quarterback, everything else in the building starts adjusting to that timeline. Coaches, schemes, roster decisions. They all begin aligning with the development of that quarterback. That kind of transition can sometimes create a crossroads moment for veteran players. Some embrace it and become mentors during the transition. Others begin to evaluate whether the timeline of the team still matches the stage of their own careers. Bitonio is one of the most experienced players on the roster, and it is natural for someone in his position to ask himself what the next few seasons might look like. Does he want to go through another period of adjustment with a team that is reshaping its identity? Or would he rather finish his career in a situation that might feel closer to immediate stability? These are the kinds of questions that veteran players quietly think about long before the public hears anything. Another major element in this situation is the arrival of the Browns' new head coach, Todd Monken. Coaching changes always bring a new energy, but they'd also bring uncertainty. Every coach has their own vision for how they want the offense to operate, how the locker room should function, and which players best fit the system they want to build. Monken is stepping into Cleveland with the task of helping guide this offense into its next phase, especially with Shedeur Sanders now part of the long-term plan. That means adjustments are happening across the board. Sometimes those adjustments work perfectly with veteran players who have already been in the building for years. Other times, the shift in philosophy can lead to difficult decisions for both the coaching staff and the players. A veteran might start wondering how his role could change in a new system. A coaching staff might evaluate whether they want to keep the core of the previous roster intact or gradually reshape it. Those kinds of evaluations happen every offseason in the NFL, but they become even more noticeable when a respected player like Bitonio is involved. What makes this situation even more fascinating is that the Browns themselves reportedly believed Bitonio might simply be debating whether to continue playing football at all. That is a very different conversation from a player potentially continuing his career somewhere else. Retirement discussions usually feel like a respectful closing chapter, but when the possibility of playing for another team enters the picture, it changes how fans and analysts interpret the situation. Suddenly the focus shifts from, is he ready to step away from the game, to why might he want a fresh start? That difference is huge in the NFL world. Veteran offensive linemen with Bitonio's reputation do not grow on trees. If he truly decides he still wants to play and becomes available, there would likely be teams across the league paying very close attention. Experienced linemen who understand complex protections and bring leadership to a locker room are always valuable. So if the Browns are facing a scenario where one of their longest tenured leaders could potentially finish his career somewhere else, it naturally becomes a story that fans want to understand in much greater detail. And right now, the details are exactly what people in Cleveland are starting to look for. Once you start digging deeper into this situation, the conversation naturally shifts to the bigger question. What exactly is happening inside the Browns organization right now? Because when a veteran like Joel Bitonio begins thinking about playing somewhere else, instead of finishing his career in Cleveland, people around the league start paying attention. Bitonio has been one of the anchors of that offensive line for years. He has played through different quarterbacks, different coaching staffs, and different versions of the Browns roster. Through all of those changes, he remained one of the most trusted and respected voices in the locker room. That is why the idea of him possibly walking away from the team feels surprising to many fans. Players like that usually become lifetime Browns. They finish their careers where they started, they get celebrated by the fan base, and eventually their names become part of the organization's long history. But the NFL does not always follow that script. Sometimes the timing between a veteran player and a team's new direction simply stops lining up. And the truth is, last season may have been one of the most frustrating years that offensive line group has experienced in a while. When you look at the tape and the overall performance of the unit, it did not feel like the same dominant group Cleveland fans had become used to watching. Protection issues showed up at key moments. The offense struggled to find consistent rhythm. Some games felt like the line was fighting an uphill battle snap after snap. For an offensive lineman, there are few things more frustrating than feeling like the group is not operating with the same level of control it once had. Offensive lines thrive on chemistry. Those 5 players have to move like a single unit, reacting to defensive fronts, communicating protections, and trusting each other on every snap. When that chemistry starts slipping, the entire offense can feel the impact. Bitonio has been part of that unit long enough to understand exactly what a strong offensive line is supposed to look like. So when things are not operating at that level, a veteran leader like him is naturally going to feel that frustration more than most. There were also moments last season where the conversation around the Browns' offensive line became louder than usual. Analysts, reporters, and even fans began asking questions about what was happening up front. Some believed the group was simply dealing with injuries and inconsistency. Others thought there were deeper issues affecting the unit's performance. Whenever a team goes through a difficult stretch, the speculation around the locker room starts growing. People begin trying to figure out whether the struggles are purely football related or whether there are internal tensions playing a role as well. Offensive linemen are usually one of the quietest position groups in the NFL when it comes to media attention. They prefer to handle things inside their room and keep the spotlight off themselves. But when a season does not go the way a group expects, even those quiet rooms can become filled with tough conversations. Now add another layer to this entire situation: the arrival of Shedeur Sanders. A new quarterback can change the entire energy of a franchise. Teams begin reorganizing their offensive approach around the strengths of that quarterback. Coaches adjust playbooks, skilled players adapt their roles, and the offensive line has to learn how to protect a quarterback with a specific style of play. Shedeur Sanders is a young quarterback with a lot of attention surrounding him, and Cleveland clearly sees him as a major piece of their future. Whenever that happens, the roster around that quarterback starts evolving to match that vision. Younger players may get more opportunities. The coaching staff begins focusing on building chemistry between the quarterback and the offensive system. For veterans who have already spent years in the league, that type of transition can create an interesting moment of reflection. Some veterans love helping guide a young quarterback through his early years. Others quietly wonder if the team's timeline now stretches further into the future than they personally want to wait. That is why Bitonio's situation is being watched so closely right now. It is not just about whether he wants to keep playing football. It is about what his decision might say regarding the direction of the Browns as a whole. When a respected veteran evaluates his future, he is usually looking at several factors at once. He is thinking about the competitiveness of the roster, the stability of the coaching staff, and the overall trajectory of the team. He is asking himself whether the next few seasons will feel like a strong opportunity to compete at a high level. Players who have spent a decade battling in the trenches do not take those decisions lightly. Every additional season requires physical sacrifice, mental preparation, and a commitment to the grind that defines life in the NFL. If Bitonio truly believes he still has good football left in him, the decision about where to play becomes incredibly important, and this is where things start to get interesting across the league. If the possibility of Bitonio continuing his career elsewhere becomes real, there would almost certainly be teams calling to check on that situation. Experienced offensive linemen with leadership qualities are always valuable, especially for teams trying to stabilize their protection or strengthen the culture inside their locker room. A player who has spent years as a respected veteran in Cleveland would bring immediate credibility to any offensive line room he joins. That is why this story has quickly grown beyond just a local Browns conversation. Around the NFL, people are starting to watch closely to see what Joel Bitonio ultimately decides to do next. Now here is where the situation starts getting even more interesting, because whenever a respected veteran begins weighing his future, people inside the NFL start asking deeper questions about timing. Joel Bitonio has been in Cleveland long enough to witness multiple eras of Browns football. He has seen the rebuilding years, the coaching changes, the quarterback rotations, and the moments when the team looked like it was finally turning a corner. Through all of those transitions, he stayed consistent. He kept showing up every season, lining up at guard, and doing the kind of work that rarely gets headlines but makes a huge difference on the field. That kind of long-term commitment usually creates a strong connection between a player and a franchise. It is the type of relationship where fans begin assuming that player will retire wearing the same jersey he started with. That is why the idea of Bitonio possibly finishing his career somewhere else feels so unusual. It raises the question of whether the Browns are entering a phase where even their longest tenured leaders are starting to reevaluate where they fit in the new direction. And when people talk about the new direction in Cleveland right now, the conversation almost always circles back to Shedeur Sanders. The organization is clearly moving into a new chapter centered around the development of their young quarterback. Whenever a team commits to building around a quarterback, it changes the entire rhythm of the roster. The offense begins evolving around that player's strengths. The coaching staff starts shaping the scheme to support his growth. Even the locker room energy can shift because younger players start becoming the center of attention within the franchise. That process can be exciting for a team looking toward the future, but it can also create an adjustment period for veterans who have spent years operating under a different structure. Offensive linemen in particular feel that transition immediately because the style of the quarterback directly affects how they play the game. Different quarterbacks move differently in the pocket, extend plays in different ways, and require different protection approaches. That means the offensive line must adapt quickly as the quarterback develops his rhythm. For a veteran like Bitonio, that adjustment is not just about learning a new system or protecting a new quarterback. It is also about understanding where he fits in the long-term vision of the team. Veteran players often think about the next 2 or 3 seasons in a very practical way. They ask themselves questions that fans rarely consider. Is the roster close to competing at a high level? Is the coaching situation stable? Is the offensive system something that will maximize the strengths of the players already in the building? These are the kinds of conversations that happen quietly between players, agents, and organizations every offseason. The public usually only sees the final decision, but the process behind that decision can take months of reflection. Bitonio has already given a large portion of his career to the Browns, and players in that position often want to make sure their final seasons are spent in the right environment. Another factor that makes this situation worth watching is the leadership role Bitonio has carried for years. Inside an NFL locker room, leadership is not just about wearing a captain's patch. It is about setting the tone during practice, guiding younger players through difficult moments, and holding the offensive line room accountable when things are not going well. Bitonio has been one of those steady voices for Cleveland for a long time. Younger linemen have looked up to him. Coaches have trusted him to help maintain discipline within the group. When someone with that kind of influence begins questioning his future with the team, it naturally creates a ripple effect throughout the locker room. Teammates notice it, coaches pay attention to it, and fans start wondering whether the team is entering a moment where the old guard is slowly giving way to a completely new generation of players. At the same time, it is important to remember that situations like this are rarely about one simple reason. NFL decisions almost always come down to a mix of factors. Physical wear and tear plays a role. Personal goals matter. The direction of the franchise becomes part of the conversation as well. Bitonio has battled in the trenches for years, and that position demands a level of physical endurance that few people outside football fully understand. Every snap involves collisions with some of the strongest defenders in the league. Every season adds more miles to a player's body. That reality forces veterans to carefully evaluate how much longer they want to continue the grind of professional football. If Bitonio still feels strong enough to compete, the next question becomes whether Cleveland is the place where he wants to spend those final seasons. What makes this entire situation even more fascinating is how quickly the narrative around Cleveland seems to be shifting. Just a short time ago, the focus of the Browns' offseason was almost entirely on the excitement surrounding the arrival of Shedeur Sanders and what his presence could mean for the future of the offense. Fans were talking about a fresh start, a new quarterback with confidence and talent, and a coaching staff ready to design an offense that could finally unlock the potential this team has been searching for. That kind of optimism tends to dominate the headlines when a young quarterback enters the picture. Teams and fan bases love the idea of turning the page and beginning a brand new chapter. But while that excitement builds around the future, the reality inside an NFL locker room is often more complicated, because every new chapter also forces tough decisions about the players who helped write the previous ones. Joel Bitonio represents exactly that kind of bridge between the past and the future of the Browns. He has been part of this organization through multiple stages of rebuilding and restructuring. When Cleveland struggled to find stability, he was still there anchoring the offensive line. When the roster began improving and expectations started rising, he was still there playing the same reliable brand of football that earned him respect across the league. Players like that often become the emotional backbone of a franchise. They represent continuity during years when almost everything else changes. But the NFL moves fast, and teams constantly reshape themselves around new opportunities. The arrival of Shedeur Sanders and the hiring of Todd Monken signal that Cleveland is fully committing to building something new. Whenever a team makes that kind of commitment, the roster inevitably begins shifting around that vision. That shift is not always dramatic or immediate. Sometimes it happens gradually, one decision at a time. Younger players receive larger roles. Coaching philosophies begin influencing personnel decisions. The style of the offense evolves to match the strengths of the quarterback and skilled players leading the new era. Offensive linemen often feel those adjustments before anyone else because they must adapt to changes in play design, timing, and protection calls. A new offensive system can completely alter how the line operates on every snap. Even experienced players who have spent years mastering one style of offense must adjust their habits when a new coaching staff brings in different ideas. For some veterans, that challenge becomes exciting. They see it as an opportunity to extend their careers by learning something new. For others, it becomes a moment to step back and evaluate whether they want to go through another period of transition at this stage of their careers. Bitonio's situation feels like it is sitting right at that crossroads. He is not just another veteran considering his options. He is one of the longest tenured players on the Browns roster, and someone who helped define the culture of that offensive line room for years. If a player with that level of influence begins exploring the possibility of finishing his career somewhere else, it sends a signal that the organization may truly be entering a new phase. That does not necessarily mean something negative is happening inside the building. In fact, transitions like this are a normal part of the NFL life cycle. Teams grow, evolve, and eventually pass the torch from one generation of players to the next. But those moments can still feel significant when they involve players who have been associated with the team for so long. Another reason this story has gained attention is the simple reality that experienced offensive linemen are incredibly valuable around the league. Teams are always searching for stability in the trenches. A veteran who understands complex protection schemes and has proven he can perform at a high level for years becomes a very attractive option for contenders looking to strengthen their offensive line. If Joel Bitonio ultimately decides he wants to continue playing football, there would likely be several organizations interested in bringing that level of experience into their locker room. Coaches love players who can mentor younger linemen while still contributing on the field. Quarterbacks love linemen who understand the subtleties of pass protection and communication at the line of scrimmage. That combination of leadership and skill is difficult to find, which is why players like Bitonio tend to have options when they approach the later stages of their careers. At the same time, Cleveland fans are watching this story closely because it touches on something deeper than just one player's future. It reflects the reality that the Browns are standing at the beginning of a new era. The franchise is trying to build momentum around Shedeur Sanders and the offensive vision Todd Monken is bringing to the team. That vision may require adjustments to the roster, the locker room leadership structure, and the overall identity of the offense. Whenever that kind of transformation begins, difficult decisions naturally follow. Some familiar faces remain part of the journey. Others eventually move on as the team reshapes itself. For now, everything surrounding this story still sits in the stage of possibilities and discussions. Bitonio could decide that Cleveland is still the place where he wants to finish his career. He could take time to evaluate whether his body and motivation are ready for another season in the league. Or he could explore the idea of finishing his journey with a different team that might offer a new opportunity late in his career. Until a final decision is made, the conversation will continue growing,